Okay, we are here with our interview number two, People in Culture interview. My name is Jose Wong. My cultural background is Asian Latino. The cultural background, my interview it is Mexican American. The age range is 30 to 40. The gender is male. Education is a master's degree, and the occupation is a principal in Pasadena ISD. Mr. Hernandez, thank you very much for agreeing to have my interview.
Thank you for thinking about me.
Let me ask you the first one. Please describe the most important values and beliefs in of your culture.
So as you stated before, my cultural ethnic background is Mexican American, and I grew up in the Valley, which is right along the border of South Texas, and I feel like for us, what we were taught at a very early age was you work and you have family. And so when we talk about the most important values was that we had a job and then we provided for our family, and that was the main. This is what we do. And then again, you had to be Catholic. You had to go to the church. You had to have Diosito in your life, and those were the biggest things. That you worked, you took care of your family, and you went to church, and you made sure that everybody knew that.
Oh, very good. What about this one? Please describe the important cultural events, celebrations, and practices in your culture.
And so, when we talk about the Mexican American piece, and I tease my mom about this a lot, is that she raised us thinking we were Caucasian. Yeah, I'm a very dark skinned man, but we were raised to think that we were Caucasian, that we were not Mexican at all. So a lot of our she tried to raise us like we didn't have any Mexican culture in us at some point, but then a lot of it was Hispanic culture. We had the fiestas, we celebrated, all of the, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter. And so she tried to shield us from the other things that were in our heritage, like we didn't do quinceañeras, we didn't do padrinos or anything like that. But then through the church, we did do. We made sure to get baptized. You went to confirmation. You did your 9 catechisms or whatever that's called. I don't even remember. You did communion. All of those things are things that were important to us. Those are events that would happen, but we didn't do the other Los Muertos because my mom said we weren't that Mexican. We celebrated birthdays. We celebrated deaths as well. But it's just kind of a mixture of things because my mom wanted to shield us from, we're not Mexican, we're American, but Mexican American. So it's just very weird.
Okay, that's a bit interesting. What about this one? What are some of the reading materials, or films, or videos that kind of help us learn about your culture?
We talk about reading materials. There wasn't really anything that I would say per se that would be a reading material, but I would think about like the music, which would be something that had been written and we understood a lot. That we listened to a lot of Tejano music, Little Joe, El Grupo Más. Those were the readings. You would buy a cassette and you would read the lyrics of of what we were doing, and then so there wasn't really anything that we would read that you could read to talk about our culture, but there was music that you can hear. So Tejano music really embodied that stuff about our lives as we were growing up. Films and video, my family was kind of always involved in the bad part of the legal proceedings. And so videos and films like American Me, Born in East LA, La Niña de la Mochila Azul, all of those things kind of are what we grew up watching, grew up seeing. El Chavo del Ocho, Sábado Gigante. Those are videos. Those are things that we used to see that were part of our Mexican. But then we also did Sesame Street. We did all the popular culture American things too. So it's just a mixture. It was a conglomerate of different things here and there that just really made up the type of culture that I grew up in.
Okay. How do you think others outside of your culture view your culture?
I think my mom impressed on us a lot to make sure that we thought of ourselves as American, so that they would, whenever we were out and about, we wouldn't feel that judgment from other people. So we tried really to Americanize ourselves as much, so that when people saw us, they wouldn't say, "Ooh, that dirty Mexican," because that's what we were taught to think, that if people saw you as a Mexican, you were a dirty Mexican. So if people saw you as an American, then you were a clean American and you weren't a dirty Mexican. So they kind of shunned us away from the Mexican culture, and I think that part of it was when she was growing up in the 60s or late 50s, early 60s. That was a really bad stigma. Hispanic people were dirty, and they couldn't speak Spanish. They had to do away with all of their culture and be Americanized to be seen as viable citizens. So she impressed that stuff on us too. Whether it was right or wrong, I think it was probably did a little bit more harm for the Mexican part of our culture, but it is what it is, and that's the way we're taught. So people see us, when you talk about Mexicans, they see us as a bad thing.
Oh, wow. Now, what are the fondest memories that you have from your childhood?
From what I remember, and we talked about it earlier on our celebrations and stuff, but I just remember our weekends were spent at a barbecue or at somebody's house with a fiesta. It was always a family gathering, and that was part of our values and beliefs, that it was family. And so we were always at somebody's grilling, we were always at somebody's house having a party, or just staying with each other. So it was really just, my fondest memories are just always having my family around, aunts, uncles. And the funny thing is that family was huge. My mom was one of 8 kids, and my dad was one of 9 kids. So imagine all of those tias and tios and all of the primos, and each one of those siblings had at the very least 4 kids. So you start multiplying 8 times 4 plus these 8 times 4, and it was a huge gathering always, and it was always at somebody's house, and it was always just something fun. So my fondest memories were those, and my one most that I hold dear was going to our family reunion in Kansas when I was maybe 8 or 9, and we drove all the way to Kansas from Donna, Texas, all the way to Kansas to family reunion. I didn't say this earlier, but when we were talking about values and beliefs, and my mom's impressing on us that we were Americans, is her line that she always used to use was, "We didn't cross the border crossed us." Simply saying, we always lived in the area, in the Corpus, San Antonio, Alice area, and the border, we didn't cross the border crossed us. So it's something she sticks to really heavily,
Very interesting, the point that your mother made, and that one right there. Now, going to this one then, what about, have you ever experienced prejudice and discrimination? And would you please elaborate if those things happen to you?
I would say so. My wife is a white-skinned, red-haired woman, and the things that I experienced are walking into shops and people giving me the second look, like that dark-skinned Mexican boy is with that white girl, But even before that, just the persona. I could remember being 21, driving up to Austin, and I was in my white Camaro, Hispanic boy with facial hair and some long hair, and getting pulled over and having my car torn apart because they were pretty sure I was traveling with drugs because I was coming from Donna, Texas, all the way to Austin, and I crossed the checkpoint, and they thought, you know what, this guy has something in his car, so I got pulled over, put off to the side of the street, and all of my belongings taken out of my car, put off on the side of the street, and they searched my car, and it was possibly close to a 1 hour, 2 hour ordeal where I'm sitting off on the side of the road, and these people think that I'm transporting drugs, and I can't help but feel that it's because of the car I was driving, the way that I looked. But I complied. They found nothing, because there is nothing, and went on our way. But I feel that that's a good piece of them discriminating the way I looked.
So do you think they just use excuse just to do all those things, because there were no need to do that?
No, there was no need, but they thought that they had probable cause, and
So
whenever you hear,
so you feel a little bit of discrimination in that point, really.
yeah, I mean, and I had some things going against me.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a sports car, a young gentleman, in a nice sports car, and I looked scruffy, scraggly. I had facial hair, long hair. I had a rock concert T-shirt on. I was going to a rock concert in San Antonio, or Austin, for that matter. But I could see what they saw was, this doesn't look right, and it's it's the middle of the night. I had left after work, so, and the concert was the next day, so I get it. And then whenever they ask, where'd you come from? Donna, Texas. In our town, we joke that it's called Little Columbia because there's a lot of drugs that come through our town. And so they have these little pieces. It didn't look like I could afford the car that I was driving, especially the way I was dressed. It was late at night. I said I'm from Donna, Texas. All those pieces start to clue in that there might be something else going on here. But and I could have been mad. I could have gotten outraged. I could have fought back. I could have done all that, but I really had nothing to worry about. So,
Well, I'm sorry you had to go through that situation. Looks like it was very unfair. Do you perceive counseling? How do you perceive counseling and counselors?
Growing up too, I talk about my mom. My dad really didn't say much, but I talk about my mom because she's the sage words of wisdom, if you could say that piece. But the thought was, you always fix your problems. You always fix your own problems, and that's not necessarily true. And I perceive that counseling and counselors are things that we really need to have, because what we see and what we think is only from our perspective, and it behooves us to know that there is always a different way to look at the things that are going on in our life, and to receive advice or receive words that would either encourage us, discourage us from doing something, so that we can then make a better choice. In our culture, thinking about counseling, we don't go to counselors. No, we do need to go to counselors that would help us either mediate a situation, if it's husband and marriage counseling, or family therapy, or any one of those things. Because when you get to that point, we've got to understand that we are not equipped to deal with some of the situations that are dealt in front of us, because we don't know what it means when we bring it and present it to somebody else, to have their view then imposed on us, and that way we can make a better decision, and it's a give and take. So I perceive counseling and counselors as a necessity to further better either interpersonal relationships, with yourself, or with the relationships you have with other people.
Okay. What about this one right here? When it comes to counseling, what approach or intervention do you think will help you or someone from your cultural group the most?
The best approach is the understanding approach when you're talking about culture. Um, but more than that is, it doesn't matter what culture you come from, if you build a relationship with the person that is being counseled or the counselor, that's what makes the intervention happen the best. That relationship piece is just so huge. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, Asian, whatever ethnicity you might be. If you can build a relationship because you want the counseling, or if you build a relationship because you're giving the counseling, that's just that best piece that helps it flourish to be something more than just a routine.
Very good. What about the last one? If there's anything else, would you like to add to help me understand your culture better?
Again, I talked about the different things that make up what I would consider my culture. What we have to understand is that for me and where I came from, and for other people, is we were told so many times that we weren't Mexican that we forgot that we were. I mean, and if you look at me, I am a dark skinned Hispanic. But I was raised thinking I was Caucasian, white Caucasian, and that Mexicans were dirty. And I had this divide that I'm American, they're Mexican. And it wasn't until I was mature enough to realize my life, the way I was living it, I was more Mexican than the people I was calling dirty names to, because that's the way we were raised. It was bad to speak Spanish. It was bad to involve that culture in your life. It was bad to even say, have any pride in, yeah, Mexico. And so I can't ever really say, yeah, I'm Mexican, yeah, Viva Mexico, because I said so many bad things about it that I can't. But I know that it's a part of my life, and it framed my life, because the things we did were very Mexican. They weren't white.
So you think that was just a bad time, or the timing, that because all these things that happened with your family before you were born, they make them change the way they were thinking?
I think so. I think that the 60s and the 50s, when my parents were growing up, were integral, because they were trying to drown any U.S. citizen in, you're an American. And it was a stigma. It had a very bad stigma to even be associated with a Mexican. So my mom, I'm not Mexican. And she had more of a voice in our family than my dad. My dad just worked. That's it. He worked. He brought food home. He brought money home. That's it. That's all that mattered to him. But my mom, on the other hand, would be the one that would drop those little things when someone did something wrong. She would say, Mexico, llévate tu gente. Mexico, take your people. And as we're older now, it's like, Mom, we are from Mexico. Where our heritage comes from there. And and on my mom's side, she'll fight tooth and nail, say, no, I'm not Mexican, we were always here. And her grandparents were some part Indian, and she's gonna die thinking that she was never a Mexican. But we're Mexicans, man. We were Mexican Americans, true and through. It's just funny to hear about Hispanos, Chicanos, Latino Americans, and having all of these different different names for it. No, we're Mexican Americans, and that's okay.
Well, Mr. Hernandez, has been a privilege and a pleasure to have the interview about it. And I gain a lot of insights about the information. So
Good
thank you
deal.
very much.
Sorry, I have to. Oh.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wong.